Mikhalia, you've had periods in your life as a family where your dad has probably feared he may lose you. You feared you may lose your dad, and you both may have feared that you would lose your mum, Mikhalia, and Jordan, your wife. I mean, you've had some extraordinary things to deal with as a family. How have you dealt with that?
Have you dealt with that?
I don't have PTSD anymore, so I think I've dealt with that. How did we deal with that?
We communicated.
Jeez. We communicated a lot and prayed at the end when it got really tough.
So that's interesting.
We tried to find our way through. I told Mikhalia when she was a little kid, I told her at one point when she got really sick, I said, we had a very serious conversation. She wasn't a very old girl. I said, look, kid, you're gonna have a very hard life. It's gonna be brutal. And this is after we knew she had the worst case of arthritis that the Toronto Sick Kids Hospital had ever seen. That's not a diagnosis you want to hear from a hospital, not a big hospital. Well, your child has the worst case of this illness we've ever seen. It's like, what's her prognosis? Multiple early joint replacements. So that's like painful degeneration followed by early death. Oh yeah, that's not so good. Well, so what's worse than that? Well, what's worse than that is adopting the role of victim, becoming resentful, and turning against life, because then you get to have multiple early collapsed joints followed by death, then you get to be ultimately miserable and in hell at the same time. So I sat her down and I said, look, kid, don't ever use your illness as an excuse. Like, it's going to be difficult for you to do things, difficult for you to get up in the morning to go to school. It's going to be painful. And it's even going to be hard for you to tell when you can do something and when you can't, when you're justified in saying, look, Dad, I just can't get out of bed. He said, don't fool yourself about your illness, because then you won't be able to distinguish what you can do from what you can't do, and then you will truly be lost. And she listened. You know, I don't think you were more than about 9 or 10 when we had that conversation. She listened. Yeah. I had a conversation with my son at about the same time. You know, and I said, look, kid, your sister is very sick and we're screwed. And the probability that I'm going to be able to pay sufficient attention to you for the next few years is like 0. You're going to have to face this, and you're going to have to grow up and take this on yourself. And you cannot be any trouble, because we've got enough trouble. Any more, it's going to sink us. And so he listened, and he was no trouble. I mean, how was Julian with you when you were at home?
Good, very good. Compassionate for somebody who's fairly disagreeable.
Right.
Yeah.
And he stuck around. He was at home. I mean, he had lots of friends and he did his teenage things, but he came home and he helped, and he was no trouble.
We have a clip,
he had his things to deal with, but he took care of them himself.
We have a clip of you guys with Julian, I think, just several years ago, which will show people, just to show who Julian is.
So one of the great ways to figure out what to write about is, well, what bugs you? Notice that. That's that involuntary rumination. That's the manifestation of underlying complexes from a psychoanalytic perspective. So something's on your mind, poking you, bugging you. It's like Jiminy Cricket in Pinocchio.
That is really annoying.
That's why I did it, man. I knew that would bug you.
It's a great clip. We don't see a lot of Julian. You know, he's not as high profile as you two. But you're a very tight family. I mean, Mikhalia, the way your dad talked that, it could be taken as being tough love, or it could be just a reality check of, look, you can either spend the next few years of your life feeling sorry for yourself, or you can crack on with life and make the best of it, which is exactly the advice I would have given one of my children in that position. But how did you feel at the time you were given it?
Well, I think I remember that, and I think I was in grade 2. So I would have been 7 or 8. I was pretty little. So I didn't even, at that time, I didn't even understand what arthritis was. I thought, oh great, I have an old person disease. That's as much as I understood, and I didn't want to tell anybody about it because it was an old person disease. And so I don't even think I had second thoughts about anything Dad said because I was so young. I just figured, okay, that's my dad, that's what he says I should do, then I'll do it. I don't think I thought anything more than that. But I do think that was instrumental in getting out of chronic illness, honestly.
Yeah, because you barely got out of it. If you would have complicated it up with some additional stupidity, some resentment, well, I think that's probably true in our family in general. I mean, we didn't do things perfectly, but we did our best not to be resentful, and resentment is really a killer. I think if you would have burdened yourself with victimized resentment, you wouldn't have made it.
Yeah, you know what I did rather than become resentful. And I don't know if this was a healthy thing to do, but I got really angry. I didn't get angry at anybody per se. I got angry it wasn't feeling sorry for myself, but it was, what am I gonna do to get out of this?
That's
like, how
resolution,
dare
man.
life do this to me? That's not who I am.
Yep.
So
Right.
I was angry for a long time.
Yeah, well,
George,
that's part of, one of the things you want to do is you want to get your anger on your side. You want to put it inside instead of facing you and stopping you. You want to use it as a force that drives you forward. And you definitely did that. You were a pretty implacable person.